I never imagined that a week away from home would cost me everything I held dear. My son sold my grand piano while I was gone, pocketing $90,000 without a word. The silence when I walked through my front door that afternoon still echoes in my bones. If you've ever trusted someone completely only to have that trust shattered, you'll understand what I'm about to share. This story isn't easy to tell, but I'm opening my heart because perhaps someone out there needs to hear it, needs to know they're not alone in feeling used by the people they love most. If this resonates with you, I hope you'll stay with me through this journey and maybe hit that subscribe button so we can reach others who need these words. Your support helps me know I'm not speaking into the void. The taxi pulled up to my brownstone in Brooklyn on a humid August afternoon. I'd spent 7 days in Cape Cod, my first real vacation in over a decade. My hands still smelled faintly of sunscreen and salt air. I'd walked on beaches, read 3 novels, and slept without setting an alarm. For 1 week, I hadn't cooked for anyone. Hadn't balanced anyone's checkbook, hadn't mediated family disputes, or covered unexpected expenses. I'd simply existed for myself. Those 7 days had felt like waking up from a long sleep. Each morning I'd walked barefoot on the beach, feeling the cool sand between my toes, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. I'd eaten fresh seafood at small restaurants where nobody knew my name or my history. I'd sat on the porch of my rental cottage, listening to the waves and remembering who I used to be before motherhood, before widowhood, before I became the person everyone turned to when they needed something. On the last morning, I'd stood at the water's edge and made a promise to myself. I would do this more often. I would prioritize my own needs. I would stop feeling guilty every time I took a breath that wasn't in service of someone else. The woman reflected in those calm waters deserved more than I'd been giving her. The drive back to Brooklyn had felt like a slow descent from peace into obligation. With each mile closer to home, I felt the weight settling back onto my shoulders. But I'd told myself it would be different this time. I'd carry some of that Cape Cod peace with me. I'd hold on to the clarity I'd found. The house felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. Not dramatically wrong, nothing you could point to and name, just a subtle shift in the air, like someone had rearranged the molecules while I was gone. I set my suitcase down in the entryway, noting how the afternoon light fell across the hardwood floors in unfamiliar patterns. Then, I walked into the living room, and my heart stopped. The space where my Steinway grand piano had stood for 32 years was empty. Not just empty, but aggressively vacant, a void that screamed at me. The indentations in the carpet were still visible, 4 deep marks where the legs had pressed into the fibers for decades. A rectangle of darker wood showed on the floor where the piano's shadow had protected it from sunlight. My knees went weak. I actually reached for the doorframe to steady myself, my fingernails digging into the painted wood. The room tilted sideways, and for a moment, I thought I might faint. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine, the sound of my blood pressure spiking, of my nervous system going into shock. I stood there, my beach bag slipping from my shoulder to the floor. My breath came in short gasps. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe I'd walked into the wrong house, though I'd lived here for 37 years and knew every creaking floorboard. Maybe this was a nightmare, and I'd wake up in my Cape Cod cottage with the sound of seagulls outside. Maybe I was having a stroke, and my brain was showing me impossible things. But no. The rest of the room was exactly as I'd left it. The photographs on the mantel, the worn spot on the couch where I always sat, the stack of unread magazines on the coffee table. Everything was the same except for the most important thing, the heart of this house, the soul of my family's history. That piano wasn't just furniture. My grandmother had played Chopin on those keys in her apartment in Warsaw before the war. My mother had shipped it to America in 1952, paying for it to cross an ocean rather than leave it behind. I'd learned to play on that bench, my small feet barely reaching the pedals. I'd played at my wedding, at both my children's birthday parties, at my husband's funeral. The wood had absorbed 32 years of my fingerprints, my tears, my joy. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called my son, Marcus. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice casual, almost cheerful. "Hey, Mom, you're back. How was the trip?" "Marcus." My voice came out strangled. "Where is my piano?" A pause. Too long. I could hear him breathing, could almost hear him calculating his response. In that silence, I knew. Whatever he was about to say, it would be bad. "Oh, that. Yeah, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. Where is it?" "I sold it, Mom. Got a great price, too. $90,000. I figured you never play it anymore, and the money could really help with—" I hung up. My hands were trembling so violently, I nearly dropped the phone. Sold it. He sold it. While I was eating lobster rolls and watching the waves, while I was making promises to myself about self-care and boundaries, my son was selling the most precious thing I owned. The betrayal hit me in waves. First the shock, then the disbelief, then the crushing weight of reality. This was my son, my firstborn, the baby I'd nursed and rocked and sung to sleep, the boy I'd defended against playground bullies and stern teachers, the man I'd supported through failed businesses and broken dreams. And he'd walked into my home and stolen from me. The phone rang immediately. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Again. On the fourth call, I answered. "You can't just sell my things, Marcus. That piano was..." "Was what, Mom? Sitting there gathering dust. When's the last time you actually played it?" "I'm serious. When? Because I can't remember seeing you touch those keys in years." His words stung because they held a grain of truth. I hadn't played much lately. Life had gotten busy, my arthritis had gotten worse, and sitting at the piano reminded me too much of everything I'd lost. But not playing it didn't mean I didn't love it, didn't mean it wasn't precious, didn't mean he had any right to take it. That's not the point. It was mine. It belonged to your great-grandmother. And now it belongs to someone who'll actually use it. Look, I needed the money, okay? My business is expanding. And I saw an opportunity. I knew you'd never agree to sell it if I asked, so I just handled it. The buyer came highly recommended, paid in full, everything was legitimate. You should be thanking me for getting such a good price. I couldn't speak. The audacity of his words, the complete absence of remorse, left me speechless. "Besides," he continued, his tone shifting to something I'd heard before, something that made my stomach turn. "You told me I could sell it. Don't you remember? Right before you left, we were talking about my business needs, and you said I could take care of whatever needed to be taken care of. You were probably distracted, packing for your trip, but you definitely said it was fine." Had I? My mind raced backward through our last conversation. He'd been talking about needing capital, something about a new location, but I'd been running late for my flight, rushing around the house gathering last-minute items. Had I said something that could have been interpreted as permission? Had I been so scattered that I'd accidentally agreed to lose the most important object I owned? "I never—" I started, but he cut me off. "You did, Mom. I wouldn't lie about something like that. Maybe you just forgot. You've been forgetting a lot of things lately, haven't you? Last month you couldn't remember where you put your glasses, and they were on your head the whole time. And that dinner you thought was on Tuesday when it was actually Wednesday. It's okay. It happens as we get older." That's actually another reason I thought selling the piano was smart. If you can't remember our conversations, you probably don't need to be worrying about maintaining a big, expensive instrument, you know? The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment I almost believed him. Almost let him plant that seed of doubt in my mind. But something in me, some small voice that sounded suspiciously like the woman I'd been in Cape Cod, said no. "No, you didn't agree to this. No, you're not losing your mind. No, this is not your fault." I ended the call and sank onto the couch. My couch. In my house. Surrounded by my things. Except the one thing that mattered most was gone, and my own son was suggesting my memory was failing. That I'd authorized my own heartbreak. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had said something. I was 68 years old, and yes, sometimes I did forget small things. Who didn't? But would I forget giving permission to sell my grandmother's piano? Would I forget something so monumental? Over the next 3 days, I replayed that conversation in my mind hundreds of times. Each replay made me less certain. Marcus called twice more, both times gently suggesting I was confused about what was said and that he'd only done what I asked him to do. By the third day, I'd almost convinced myself that maybe, possibly, I had said something that could have been misinterpreted. Then my daughter called. "Mom, is it true? Did Marcus really sell Babsia's piano?" Hearing it from Rachel made it more real somehow. "Yes," I whispered. "And you agreed to this?" He says I did. I don't remember it, but he says, "Mom, stop. Just stop." Rachel's voice was sharp, cutting through my uncertainty. "You would never agree to sell that piano. Never. I don't care if you were distracted or tired or whatever excuse he's using. That piano was sacred to you. We all knew it. He knew it. He's gaslighting you, and I can't believe he'd stoop this low. But what if I did forget? Did you agree to sell Babsia's piano?" "No." "Then you didn't forget. Mom, listen to me. He's been doing this for years, making you doubt yourself, making you think you're losing your mind, when really he's just rewriting history to suit whatever he needs in the moment. Remember when he swore you'd promised him $5,000 for his daughter's private school, and you had to show him your bank statements to prove you'd never discussed it? Or when he told the whole family you'd volunteered to co-sign his lease, and you'd never even seen the apartment? This is what he does." Her words hit me like cold water. She was listing incidents I'd buried, moments I'd convinced myself were misunderstandings or my own mistakes. But hearing them all together, seeing the pattern laid bare, I couldn't deny it anymore. "Rachel," I said slowly, "how long have you known? How long have you been watching him do this to me?" A long silence. Then, in a voice thick with emotion, "Years, Mom. I've been trying to tell you for years, but you always defended him, always made excuses. I stopped bringing it up because it was just pushing you away, and I couldn't bear to lose you too." "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I should have listened to you." "You're listening now," she said. "That's what matters. What are you going to do?" I closed my eyes. She was right. Oh God, she was right. This wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the fifth time. It was just the most devastating. The certainty of knowing I'd been manipulated hurt almost as much as losing the piano. Almost. That evening, I sat in the empty space where the piano had been. I'd pulled the old photograph albums from the hall closet and spread them across the floor. My grandmother at 16, her fingers poised over the keys, her face serious and beautiful. My mother at 25, newly arrived in America, standing beside the piano in their first apartment, pride radiating from her smile. Me at 7, my feet dangling above the floor, my face scrunched in concentration. The piano had been our family's heartbeat, our anchor across generations and continents. And now it was gone. Sold for money that would disappear into Marcus's perpetually expanding business ventures. Ventures that never quite succeeded enough to stop him from needing more. I thought about all the times I'd helped him. The $20,000 I'd given him to start his first business 12 years ago, money I'd saved for my own retirement. The countless times I'd watched his children so he could meet with investors, canceling my own plans, my own life to accommodate his needs. The rent I'd paid when his first venture failed, the second chance funding, the third. I thought about the birthday parties he'd been too busy to attend. The Christmas he'd shown up 2 hours late because a business call ran long, then left after 20 minutes because another call came in. The times I'd been sick and he'd promised to check on me, then forgotten entirely. I thought about how he'd convinced me to lend him money by promising it was just temporary, just until the income starts flowing. But the income never flowed, or if it did, it flowed somewhere that wasn't back to me. How he'd look hurt when I gently ask about repayment, making me feel like a terrible mother for even mentioning it. I thought about the time I'd broken my wrist and needed help with groceries, and he'd said he would come but didn't, leaving me to struggle one-handed with shopping bags because he'd gotten caught up in a merger discussion that couldn't wait. The wrist had been my right one. I'd played piano with that hand for 60 years. The phone rang. Marcus again. I didn't answer. A text came through. "Mom, I'm sorry you're upset, but this is getting ridiculous. It's just a piano. I'll buy you a keyboard or something if you want to play music so badly. You're acting like I stole from you when I actually made you money. Most of which I'm planning to put toward your future care anyway, so you should really be thanking me." I stared at those words until they blurred. Just a piano. Future care. As if I were some doddering old woman who needed him to manage my life, when in reality, I was the one who'd been managing his for decades. Another text. "Also, Aunt Jennifer is asking questions, and I'd appreciate it if you'd stop making me look like the bad guy here. Tell her it was a mutual decision. She doesn't need to know our private business." I turned off my phone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the empty space where the piano should be. I kept hearing phantom music, my fingers remembering songs my mind couldn't quite name. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and made tea. Earl Grey, the kind my mother used to drink. I sat at my kitchen table and watched the steam rise from the cup, thinking about all the things I'd convinced myself to accept over the years. The kitchen was dark except for the small light over the stove. Through the window, I could see my neighbor's porch light, a steady beacon in the darkness. I wondered if they were awake too, wrestling with their own demons, or if they slept peacefully, unburdened by betrayal. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and let myself feel everything I'd been pushing down. The grief, the rage, the humiliation, the bone-deep exhaustion of having given so much and received so little in return. Research shows that 66% of people in abusive relationships leave and return multiple times before making a final break. I'd never thought of my relationship with my son as abusive. But what else do you call it when someone systematically takes from you, lies to you, manipulates your memories, and makes you doubt your own mind? I'd sacrificed so much to maintain our relationship. Not just money, though there was plenty of that. I'd sacrificed friendships. My best friend, Diane, had stopped inviting me to our book club 3 years ago because I'd canceled so many times to babysit Marcus's kids or help him move or be available for some emergency that always seemed to coincide with my plans. We'd been friends for 40 years, since our children were toddlers playing in the park together. We'd seen each other through divorces and deaths, celebrated promotions, and grandchildren. And I'd let it all disintegrate, let those decades of shared history crumble, because Marcus needed me. Because every time Diane called to confirm book club, Marcus would call 5 minutes later with some crisis that couldn't wait. My sister Jennifer barely spoke to me anymore. After watching me lend Marcus money for the 5th time, after hearing my excuses for his no-shows and broken promises, she'd said, "I can't watch you let him destroy you anymore. Call me when you're ready to stop being his doormat." I'd been furious at the time. How dare she speak about my son that way? But she'd been right. She'd seen what I couldn't or wouldn't let myself see. Even my younger son, David, had grown distant. "I can't compete with Marcus for your attention, Mom," he'd said during our last real conversation. It had been at a coffee shop, neutral territory, and I remembered how he'd stirred his coffee for a full minute before speaking, gathering courage. "He takes, and you keep giving, and there's nothing left for anyone else. I invited you to Emma's birthday party 3 times, Mom. 3 times. And every time you had to cancel because Marcus needed something. Do you know how that makes me feel? How it makes my kids feel? They think you don't care about them. I have my own family now, my own life. I can't watch this anymore." The memory of his face, the resignation in his eyes, still haunted me. I'd lost them all, one by one, because I'd chosen to believe Marcus's version of reality over my own instincts. The tea grew cold in my hands. Outside, Brooklyn was starting to wake up. I heard the first garbage trucks, the early morning joggers, the pigeons on my windowsill beginning their daily conversations. life continuing, oblivious to my crisis. I stood up and walked to my bedroom. In my closet, in a box I hadn't opened in years, I found what I was looking for. Letters, birthday cards, school projects, all the tangible evidence of motherhood. I pulled out a card Marcus had made me when he was 8, covered in crayon drawings of flowers and hearts. To the best mom in the world, I love you more than anything. When I grow up, I'm going to take care of you the way you take care of me. I sat on my bed and cried for the first time since returning home. Not quiet tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place I'd been keeping locked for years. I cried for the little boy who'd made that card, for the man who'd forgotten those promises, for the mother I'd been, and the one I'd allowed myself to become. When the tears finally stopped, something inside me had shifted. Not broken exactly, more like cracked open. A hard shell I'd been wearing for years had finally given way, and underneath it I found something I'd forgotten existed. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind. This was cold and clear and sharp. This was anger that had calcified over decades of small humiliations and large betrayals, of promises broken and boundaries violated, of being made to feel grateful for crumbs when I'd offered banquets. I thought of all the times I'd watched my bank account dwindle while Marcus's business empire supposedly grew. I thought of the inheritance from my mother that I'd split evenly between my sons, only to watch Marcus burn through his half in 2 years while David carefully invested his. I thought of the times Marcus had borrowed emergency funds that were never repaid, never even mentioned again. I thought of my piano, probably sitting in some stranger's living room now, while they had no idea of its history, its significance, its soul. I thought of how Marcus had made me doubt my own mind, my own memories, my own worth. And I decided, sitting there on my bed in the early morning light with a childhood card in my hands, that I was done. Done doubting myself, done making excuses, done sacrificing everything I was to maintain a relationship with someone who only valued what I could give him. I picked up my phone and turned it back on. 23 missed calls from Marcus, 15 text messages, progressing from apologetic to annoyed to outright angry. The last one read, "Fine, be dramatic, but you're the one who's going to regret this when you need something from me. I'm done trying to help someone who won't help themselves." I blocked his number. Then I called my niece, Jennifer's daughter, Sarah. She answered sleepily. "Aunt Margaret, it's 6 in the morning. Is everything okay?" "No," I said. My voice was steady, certain. "Everything is not okay, but it's going to be. I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come over this week?" "Of course. What's going on?" "Your cousin sold my piano while I was on vacation, and I think it's time I stopped pretending that's acceptable." A long pause. Then softly, "Oh, Aunt Margaret, we've been waiting for you to say that for so long." Sarah came over the next afternoon. She was 32, a lawyer, sharp-minded, and no nonsense. She'd always been kind to me, but I'd kept her at a distance because Jennifer had made her opinions about Marcus clear, and I'd assumed Sarah shared them. I'd been right, but instead of judgment, I found support. "Tell me everything," she said, settling onto my couch with a legal pad and pen. I did. I told her about the piano, about the manipulation, about the years of financial support that had drained my retirement savings. I showed her bank statements, loan documents, text messages. I laid it all out, every humiliating detail. Sarah listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, reviewing her notes. "Aunt Margaret," she finally said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you, at any point, in any way, give Marcus permission to sell that piano?" "No, I would never. That piano was—" "I know what it was. I remember. I remember you playing at my graduation party and how you cried during the Chopin piece because it was what great-grandma used to play. I remember you telling me about bringing it from Poland, about how it survived the war when so many things didn't. No one who understood what that piano meant would ever believe you agreed to sell it. Relief flooded through me. Someone believed me. Someone understood. What Marcus did, Sarah continued, might be considered theft, depending on how we can prove ownership and lack of consent. But more than that, what he's done over the years, the financial manipulation, the gaslighting, the isolation from family, that's elder financial abuse. There are laws about this now, protections. You have rights. Elder abuse. The words sat heavy in the air between us. I'd never thought of myself as a victim of anything. I was just a mother who'd tried her best, who'd maybe made some mistakes in judgment. But hearing Sarah name it, claim it, give it weight and legitimacy, something inside me solidified. What do I do? I asked. First, you document everything. Every loan, every promise, every instance of manipulation you can remember. Write it down with dates if you have them. Second, you cut off all financial access. If he has keys to your house, change the locks. If he's on any of your accounts, remove him. If you've made him power of attorney for anything, revoke it. Third, you decide what you want. Do you want to pursue this legally? Do you want the money back? Do you want him out of your life entirely? You get to choose, but you need to know your options. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone to tell me I had choices. For so long, Marcus had made it feel like I had to accept whatever he decided, had to go along with his plans, had to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention he threw my way. I want, I said slowly, testing the words, to stop being afraid of him. I want to stop doubting myself. I want my life back. Then we start there, Sarah said. Over the next week, I began the painful process of untangling my life from Marcus's. I went to the bank and removed him from my emergency contact list. I changed my will, which had left everything split between my sons, to include specific provisions about my belongings and clear documentation of the money I'd already given Marcus over the years. I changed my locks, even though Marcus hadn't used his key in years. Just knowing he couldn't enter whenever he wanted gave me a sense of security I'd forgotten existed. I wrote everything down. Every loan, every broken promise, every time he'd made me doubt my own memories. The list was staggering. Over 12 years, I'd given him nearly $180,000. I'd co-signed for loans he'd defaulted on. I'd used my credit cards to cover his business expenses when his were maxed out, expenses he'd promised to repay within weeks, but never had. The process of documenting everything was both painful and liberating. I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and my old bank statements, going back year by year. Each entry was a small wound reopened. $5,000 for inventory that never materialized. $8,000 for payroll during a crisis that somehow resolved itself without the business improving. $12,000 for equipment that I never saw. I remembered each request clearly now. How he'd frame it as an investment, not a gift. How he'd show me business plans and projections, spreadsheets full of numbers that promised returns that never came. How he'd make me feel like I was part of something important, like my money was building a legacy for the family. But there was no legacy, just a pattern of taking, of promises, of disappointment. And underneath it all, the unspoken threat that if I said no, if I questioned, if I hesitated, I was being a bad mother. I was crushing his dreams. I was the reason he couldn't succeed. My retirement savings, which should have been comfortable, were depleted. My credit score had taken hits from his defaults. My relationships with my sister, my friends, my younger son, all damaged by my need to protect Marcus from the consequences of his own choices. Sarah helped me draft a letter, not a legal document yet, just a clear statement of facts and boundaries. We sent it certified mail so there would be proof he'd received it. Marcus, the letter began. This is to inform you that our financial relationship is permanently concluded. I will no longer be providing loans, gifts, or any other form of financial support. You are no longer authorized to access my home, my accounts, or my personal property. Any future contact between us will need to demonstrate respect for these boundaries and acknowledgement of the harm that has been done. We listed everything, every unpaid loan, every broken promise, the manipulation, the isolation, the piano. I did not give you permission to sell my mother's piano, the letter stated. You took it without my knowledge or consent, sold it for your own benefit, and then attempted to convince me that I had authorized this. This is theft, and it is unforgivable. I do not expect you to return the piano, as I understand it has been sold. However, I do expect you to acknowledge what you did and take responsibility for your actions. Finally, the letter concluded, I love you, but I will no longer accept being treated this way. If you wish to have a relationship with me going forward, it will be on terms of mutual respect and honesty. The old dynamic is over. I am done doubting myself to make you comfortable. I am done sacrificing my well-being for your benefit. I am done. We sent it on a Tuesday. Marcus showed up at my door Thursday evening, red-faced and furious. He pounded on the door so hard I thought he might break it. I stood in my entryway, listening to him shout through the wood. You can't just cut me off like this. I'm your son. You owe me. You've always been there for me. You can't just stop now. And that letter, that ridiculous letter, making me sound like some kind of criminal when all I've ever done is try to build something, try to make you proud. You think I wanted to ask you for money? You think I enjoyed it? I did what I had to do, and you were happy to help. You always said you were happy to help. I didn't open the door. I stood there, my hand pressed against the wood, feeling the vibrations of his anger, and said nothing. Mom, I know you're in there. Open the door. We need to talk about this like adults. You can't just listen to Sarah and Jennifer. They've always had it out for me. They've never understood what I'm trying to accomplish. They're turning you against your own son. Still, I said nothing. After 15 minutes, he left. I heard his car peel away from the curb, too fast, angry. I sat down on my couch and realized my hands weren't shaking. I'd stood up to him, even in silence, and I hadn't wavered. The phone calls started that night. Not from Marcus, he'd learned I'd blocked him, but from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. His daughter, my granddaughter, crying about how I was destroying the family. His ex-wife, who I'd always gotten along with, telling me I was being unreasonable. Even a few of his business associates, people I'd never met, calling to tell me what a dedicated son Marcus was and how disappointed I must make him feel. The campaign was coordinated, I realized. He'd mobilized everyone he could think of to pressure me into backing down. It was manipulation on a scale I'd never experienced before. But I'd learned something in the past week. I'd learned that I didn't have to answer the phone. I didn't have to justify my choices to people who didn't know the full story. I didn't have to set myself on fire to keep everyone else warm. I blocked the numbers and turned off my phone. Rachel called me on my landline, which she knew I still kept for emergencies. Mom, I'm so proud of you, she said. I know this is hard. I know Marcus is probably making it hell, but you're doing the right thing. Am I? I asked. His daughter called me crying. I've never heard her so upset. She said I'm tearing the family apart. No, Mom. Marcus tore the family apart years ago. You're just finally refusing to pretend the pieces still fit together. There's a difference. I wanted to believe her. Some days I did believe her. Other days, I lay awake at night wondering if I was being cruel, if I was overreacting, if maybe I should just forgive and forget the way I always had before. Those were the days I reread the list of everything I'd given him. Those were the days I sat in the empty space where my piano had been and reminded myself why I'd started this. 3 weeks after I sent the letter, my doorbell rang on a Sunday morning. I almost didn't answer it. I'd gotten used to ignoring unexpected visitors, but something made me look through the peephole, and I saw my younger son, David, standing there with his wife and 2 children. I opened the door, and David pulled me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. His children stood behind him, uncertain, and my heart broke a little more, realizing how much distance I'd allowed to grow between us. "I heard," he said simply, his voice thick with emotion, "about the piano, about the letter, about all of it. Rachel called me. She thought I should know. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have been there for you. I should have helped you see this years ago instead of just walking away when it got too hard to watch." I started crying again, but this time the tears felt different. Lighter somehow. David and his family stayed for hours. We talked about everything, the years of distance between us, the way Marcus had dominated every family gathering, every conversation, every decision. David told me about the times he'd wanted to confront Marcus, but hadn't, afraid of making things worse for me. His wife talked about the family dinners they'd stopped hosting because Marcus would show up late, leave early, and spend the whole time on his phone. My grandchildren, 9 and 12, asked if they could see photos of the piano. I showed them the albums, told them stories about their great-great-grandmother, about the music that had filled our family for generations. The youngest, Emma, asked, "Can we get it back?" "No, sweetheart, it's gone." "That's not fair," she said, with the clear moral certainty of childhood. "He shouldn't have taken something that wasn't his." "You're right," I said. "It's not fair. But sometimes, in life, things aren't fair. What matters is how we respond to unfairness, whether we let it destroy us or whether we use it to become stronger, clearer about what we value." I don't know if she understood, but I did. For the first time in years, I felt like I was modeling something worth teaching, showing my grandchildren that it was possible to set boundaries, to demand respect, to choose your own well-being, even when it meant disappointing others. After they left, I felt lighter than I had in months. I'd been so afraid that cutting Marcus off would mean losing my whole family, but instead, I'd found pieces of it I'd forgotten existed. That night, I did something I hadn't done since before the vacation that had changed everything. I went online and looked up piano teachers. Not for me, I no longer had a piano to practice on. But I found a community center in Park Slope that offered open piano hours, times when anyone could come and play on their instruments. I signed up for a Tuesday evening slot. When Tuesday came, I almost backed out. What if I'd forgotten how to play? What if my fingers were too stiff? My memory too faded? What if the loss of my piano had taken the music from me too? But I went. The community center was warm and bright, full of voices and laughter. The piano was a humble upright, nothing like my grandmother's Steinway. But when I sat down and placed my fingers on the keys, something inside me unlocked. I played Chopin, the same piece my grandmother had played in Warsaw, that my mother had played in our first Brooklyn apartment, that I'd played at all the important moments of my life. My fingers remembered what my mind had feared was lost. An older gentleman, maybe 75, sat down in a chair near the piano and listened. When I finished, he smiled. "Beautiful," he said. "You play with real feeling, real history." "Thank you," I said. "I'm a little rusty." "Rust polishes off," he said. "The music underneath, that stays." I went back the next week, and the week after that. I started arriving early and staying late, soaking in the presence of the instrument, the act of creation, the joy I'd forgotten music could bring. Other regulars started to recognize me. We'd nod to each other, share the piano time, sometimes play together. One woman, Eleanor, was a retired music teacher. We started having coffee after our piano sessions, talking about music and life and everything in between. "I lost something precious recently," I told her one afternoon, 4 weeks into my new routine. A piano that had been in my family for generations. Someone I trusted sold it without my permission. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "I'm so sorry," she said. "That must have been devastating." It is, but I'm learning that the music wasn't in the piano. It was in me all along. The piano was just the medium. "That's very wise," Eleanor said, "though I imagine it doesn't make losing it hurt any less." "No," I admitted, "it doesn't. But it helps to know that what I really loved, the ability to make music, to connect with that history, that's still mine. No one can take that." We sat in companionable silence for a while. Then Eleanor said, "You know, I have a friend who runs an estate sale business. She's always coming across pianos that families don't want anymore. Beautiful instruments, just looking for someone to love them. Would you want me to ask if she has anything?" I started to say no, that I wasn't ready, that nothing could replace what I'd lost. But then I stopped myself. I'd spent so long holding on to things, afraid of change, afraid of moving forward. Maybe it was time to try something different. "Yes," I said, "I'd like that." A week later, Eleanor called me about a 1960s baby grand that a family in Westchester was selling for far less than it's worth. They just wanted it to go to someone who would play it, not let it sit as furniture. I went to see it the next day. It wasn't my grandmother's Steinway. It never would be. But it was beautiful in its own right, with warm tones and responsive keys. When I played it, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. I bought it. David helped me arrange transport and set it up in my living room, in the same space where my grandmother's piano had stood. It fit differently, looked different, but it filled the void that had been aching in that room. The first night it was in my house, I played until my fingers were sore. I played Chopin and Beethoven and Gershwin. I played songs my mother had taught me and songs I'd discovered on my own. I played until the windows grew dark and the streetlights came on, until my neighbors probably wondered what had possessed the quiet woman in the corner brownstone. I played until I felt whole again. Marcus called my landline a few days later. I'd forgotten to block that number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mom," he said. No greeting, no preamble. "We need to talk." "No," I said calmly. "We don't." "Yes, we do. This has gone on long enough. You've made your point, you're angry, I get it. But you can't seriously plan to keep me out of your life forever. I'm your son." "You are my son," I agreed. "And I love you. But love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. Love doesn't mean letting you take advantage of me. Love doesn't mean sacrificing my well-being for your comfort." You're twisting everything. I made one mistake with the piano, one mistake, and you're acting like I'm some kind of monster. Do you know what people are saying about you? That you've lost it, that you're being cruel, that you're punishing me for trying to help my business succeed. "Let them say what they want," I said. "I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters." "The truth?" "The truth is that I've been trying my whole life to make you proud, and nothing is ever good enough. The truth is that you've always loved David more, and now you're using this piano thing as an excuse to cut me off and play the victim." I felt the old guilt rising, the old instinct to apologize, to soothe, to fix things. But I pushed it down. "Marcus," I said, "I gave you $180,000 over 12 years. I co-signed loans I couldn't afford. I sacrificed relationships with my sister, my friends, my other son, all to support you. I did these things because I loved you, because I believed in you, because I wanted to help. But you've never once acknowledged what I gave up for you. You've never thanked me. You've never even paid me back. And when I finally set a boundary, you call me cruel. That's not... You're making it sound like... I'm making it sound like exactly what it was. And the piano, Marcus, that wasn't one mistake. That was theft. That was you taking the single most precious thing I owned and selling it for your own profit. Then lying to me about it. Then trying to convince me I'd authorized it. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. A series of choices. All of them prioritizing what you wanted over my well-being. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, so what? I'm just supposed to grovel? Beg for forgiveness? I won't do that. I won't let you make me into the villain here. I'm not making you into anything, Marcus. I'm just refusing to lie about what happened anymore. If you want a relationship with me in the future, it starts with you acknowledging the truth. All of it. The money, the manipulation, the piano. Until you can do that, we have nothing to talk about. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but it was the tremor of adrenaline, not fear. I'd done it. I'd stood up for myself completely, calmly, without backing down or second-guessing. I'd named the harm and set the boundary and refused to be convinced I was wrong. It felt like breathing after years underwater. 2 months passed. Marcus didn't call again, didn't send letters, didn't show up at my door. The family pressure campaign died down. People either accepted my decision or stopped caring enough to fight about it. I settled into a new routine. Piano lessons at the community center twice a week, coffee with Eleanor every Thursday, Sunday dinners with David and his family, real dinners where we talked and laughed and no one checked their phone constantly or left early for mysterious meetings. I reconnected with my sister, Jennifer. She came to visit one weekend, and we spent 2 days talking, crying, laughing, rebuilding what we'd lost. She brought Sarah, and the 3 of us went through old photo albums, telling stories, remembering better times. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you," Jennifer said. "I should have tried harder, found a way to reach you instead of just pulling away." "You tried," I said. "I wasn't ready to hear it. I had to come to it on my own." "Still," she said, "family should fight for each other, even when it's hard." "You did fight for me," I said. "You told me the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it. That was the most important thing you could have done." I started volunteering at a senior center in Bed-Stuy, teaching basic piano to anyone interested. Most of my students were beginners, people who'd always wanted to learn but never had the chance. Their enthusiasm was infectious, their progress a joy to witness. One student, a 72-year-old man named George, told me, "I spent my whole life taking care of other people, my wife, my kids, my parents, when they got old. Now my wife is gone, my kids are grown, and I finally get to do something just for me. This piano, these lessons, this is the first thing I've done in 50 years that's purely for my own enjoyment." I understood exactly what he meant. The seasons changed. Summer faded into fall, fall into winter. The holidays approached. The first ones where I wouldn't be scrambling to accommodate Marcus's schedule, wouldn't be lending money for gifts he couldn't afford, wouldn't be pretending everything was fine while my stomach churned with anxiety. David invited me to spend Thanksgiving with his family. "Just us," he said. "Small, quiet, easy, no drama." It sounded perfect. But 2 days before Thanksgiving, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mrs. Morrison, this is Detective Sarah Chen from the NYPD. I'm calling about a complaint that was filed regarding stolen property. Do you have a moment to talk?" My heart raced. "Yes, of course." "We received a report about a piano that was sold without the owner's consent. The individual who filed the report claims you're his mother and that there's been a misunderstanding, but we'd like to hear your side of the story." Marcus had gone to the police. Marcus had actually filed a police report, trying to make himself the victim. I took a deep breath. "Detective, I'd be happy to tell you exactly what happened. But I should probably mention that I have documentation of everything, including the fact that I never gave permission for that sale and that my son later tried to convince me I had authorized it." "I'd very much like to see that documentation, ma'am. Would you be willing to come down to the station sometime this week?" "Absolutely." I called Sarah, my niece the lawyer, immediately. She came with me to the police station the next day. We brought everything, all the documentation we'd compiled, all the evidence of Marcus's pattern of financial manipulation. Detective Chen listened to the whole story. She took notes, reviewed our documents, asked clarifying questions. When we finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Mrs. Morrison, I want to be straight with you. This is complicated. Your son did file a report, but it's about harassment, not theft. He claims you've been threatening him, trying to extort money, spreading lies about him to damage his business. He says the piano sale was legitimate and that you're making false claims because you're, and I quote, experiencing age-related cognitive decline. I felt like I'd been slapped. The audacity of it. The calculated cruelty took my breath away. That's not true, I said quietly. None of it is true. I didn't think it was, Detective Chen said. I've seen enough elder abuse cases to recognize the patterns. But I needed to hear your side before I could make a determination. Based on what you've shown me, I'm going to close his complaint and open an investigation into possible elder financial abuse. I can't promise anything will come of it. The legal system doesn't always work the way we'd like. But at minimum, there will be a record. If he tries anything else, if he escalates, this documentation will matter. Thank you, I said. That's all I wanted, just for someone to believe me, to acknowledge that what happened was real. Walking out of that police station, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Complete, overwhelming relief. Not because I thought Marcus would face consequences, I didn't particularly care about that anymore, but because the truth had been heard, documented, made official. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't confused. I wasn't suffering from age-related cognitive decline. I was a woman who'd been mistreated by someone she loved, and now there was a record of it. That was enough. Thanksgiving with David's family was everything I'd needed it to be. Warm, chaotic in the best way, full of laughter and good food and genuine affection. Emma, my youngest granddaughter, asked if I'd play piano after dinner. They'd rented an electric keyboard for the occasion. Of course, I said. I played Christmas carols even though it wasn't quite December yet. I played while everyone sang, off-key and enthusiastic. I played while Emma danced and her brother tried to harmonize. I played until my fingers were tired and my heart was full. Later, washing dishes with David, he said, "You seem different, Mom." Lighter, somehow. I feel different, I said. I feel like myself again, for the first time in years. I'm glad, he said. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to take up space and demand respect and not apologize for having boundaries. When did you get so wise? I asked. I had a good teacher, he said, even if it took her a while to remember her own lessons. December arrived with the first snow. I stood at my window, watching it fall, thinking about how much had changed in just a few months. The piano void in my living room was filled with a new instrument that I loved. My calendar was full of activities I'd chosen, people I enjoyed, commitments that energized rather than drained me. I'd lost something precious. There was no denying that. My grandmother's piano was gone, and no amount of healing would bring it back. But in losing it, I'd found something I'd misplaced years ago. Myself, my voice, my worth, my right to say no, to set boundaries, to prioritize my own well-being without guilt. I thought about all the years I'd spent doubting my own perceptions, accepting blame for things I hadn't done, sacrificing my happiness to maintain relationships with people who didn't value me. Research shows that only 1 in 20 cases of elder abuse is reported, and while my situation never became physically dangerous, the emotional and financial toll was real, undeniable, and far more common than most people realize. I'd been part of that silent majority, suffering in isolation because I was ashamed to admit my own son was exploiting me. But shame, I'd learned, was just another tool of manipulation. There was no shame in being a victim. The only shame belonged to those who victimized. Christmas came. Marcus sent a card which surprised me. Inside, he'd written, "Mom, I've had time to think. And I realize now that I may have handled some things poorly. I'd like to talk when you're ready. I miss you. Love, Marcus." I read it 3 times, looking for any acknowledgement of specific harm, any real accountability. There was none, just vague admissions of handling things poorly and an assumption that I'd eventually be ready to resume our relationship on his terms. I threw the card away. On Christmas Eve, I went to midnight mass at the church my mother had attended for 40 years. I hadn't been in over a decade, but something drew me there. The music, maybe. The sense of continuity, of being part of something larger than my own small dramas. The choir was singing in Polish, the same hymns my grandmother would have known. I closed my eyes and let the music wash over me, and for a moment I could almost feel her presence. Not the piano, not the physical object, but the essence of what it had represented. Legacy, love, the unbroken thread connecting past to present to future. When I opened my eyes, I was crying, but the tears felt clean. Healing. A woman in the pew next to me, someone I didn't know, handed me a tissue. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she whispered. "The music." "Yes," I said, "it really is." After the service, I walked home through the snowy streets. Brooklyn was quiet, peaceful, glowing with Christmas lights and the soft hush of fresh snow. I thought about the year that had passed, about all I'd lost and all I'd gained. The piano was gone. Some relationships had been severed. My bank account would probably never fully recover from years of supporting Marcus's ventures. But I had my music back. I had my self-respect. I had relationships built on mutual care rather than obligation and exploitation. I had peace. The trade, painful as it had been, was worth it. In January, something unexpected happened. I got a call from a woman named Patricia Herrera. She'd bought my grandmother's piano. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, "I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I wanted you to know that your piano is in good hands. The dealer who sold it to me mentioned its history, how it had come from Poland, how it had been in your family for generations. I wanted you to know that I understand what it means. I'll take care of it. I promise." I didn't know what to say. The fact that she'd tracked me down, that she'd thought to reach out, moved me deeply. "Thank you," I finally managed. "That means more than you know." "I'm a pianist," she said. "I perform sometimes, small venues, nursing homes, community centers. If you'd ever like to hear it played, you'd be welcome to attend one of my concerts. I'd be honored." "I'd like that," I said. 6 weeks later, I sat in a small auditorium in Manhattan and listened to Patricia Herrera play my grandmother's piano. She performed Chopin beautifully, with technical skill and emotional depth. When she played the same piece my grandmother had loved, I closed my eyes and felt the circle complete itself. The piano had moved on to a new life, a new player, a new purpose. It would make new music, create new memories, touch new hearts. Just as I was doing. After the concert, Patricia found me in the lobby. "What did you think?" she asked. "It sounded exactly as I remembered," I said. "Thank you for playing it so beautifully." "Would you like to try it?" she asked. "I'm sure we could get permission to use the auditorium for a few more minutes." I hesitated. Touching those keys again, feeling the weight of all that history, seemed almost too much to bear. But then I thought about everything I'd learned in the past 6 months, about facing difficult things instead of running from them, about allowing myself to feel grief without being consumed by it. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that very much." We went back into the empty auditorium. I sat on the familiar bench, positioned my fingers over the familiar keys, and played. The muscle memory was instant, overwhelming. This was my grandmother's piano, the instrument I'd learned on, cried over, poured my heart into for decades. The touch was exactly as I remembered. The slight resistance in the middle C key, the way the bass notes resonated through the wood, the particular tone quality that had made this instrument special among all others. My hands knew this piano the way they knew my own heartbeat. I played through the Chopin Nocturne, and with each measure, I felt layers of grief and anger and loss beginning to transform into something else. Not acceptance exactly, not forgiveness, but a kind of peace with the reality that some things couldn't be undone, only grieved and released. When I finished, Patricia was standing near the wall, tears streaming down her face. "That was extraordinary," she whispered. I've played this piano for months now, and I've never heard it sound like that. It was like it recognized you, like it was welcoming you home. But I was different now. The grief I felt was real, but it didn't own me. I could touch this piece of my history and honor it without needing to possess it. I could let it go while still carrying its music within me. I played one more piece, something my mother had taught me when I was young, a Polish folk song about homecoming and memory. Then I stood, thanked Patricia again, and walked out of that auditorium feeling somehow lighter. "Please," Patricia said as we stood in the lobby, "come back any time. This piano is yours as much as it's mine. Maybe more. The history it carries, that belongs to you and your family, and I want to honor that." We exchanged contact information, and she promised to let me know about her future performances. As I walked to the subway, I realized that this was another kind of boundary, another form of healing. I could have a relationship with my family's history without being destroyed by its loss. I could honor the past while building a new future. Spring arrived, bringing with it a sense of renewal that felt almost too on the nose. My piano students at the senior center were progressing beautifully. My relationship with David and his family had deepened. Eleanor and I had started a small piano performance group that played at local nursing homes once a month. Jennifer called one afternoon. "I have a proposition for you," she said. "Sarah's firm is looking for someone to speak at their elder law seminar. They want a personal perspective on financial abuse. Someone who's been through it and can talk about recovery. I immediately thought of you." "I don't know," I said, standing up in front of people, telling my story. "You don't have to decide right now, just think about it. I think your voice could help a lot of people who are going through what you went through, who are still stuck in that place of doubt and guilt and not knowing how to get out." I thought about it for a week, about all the times I'd felt alone, isolated, convinced I was the only one experiencing this particular brand of family dysfunction. About how desperately I'd needed someone to tell me it was okay to set boundaries, okay to prioritize myself, okay to walk away from relationships that were destroying me. I called Jennifer back. "I'll do it." The seminar was in April, held in a hotel conference room in Midtown Manhattan. About 70 people attended, mostly older adults and the lawyers or social workers who served them. I was terrified walking up to the podium, but the moment I started talking, the fear evaporated. I told my story, all of it. The piano, the manipulation, the years of financial exploitation, the slow erosion of my self-worth, and the painful process of reclaiming it. I talked about the isolation, the doubt, the guilt. I talked about the moment I decided I was done and how hard it was to stick to that decision when everyone around me was telling me I was wrong. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then the room erupted in applause. Several people were crying. During the Q&A, person after person stood up to thank me, to share their own stories, to say they'd felt alone until hearing me speak. An elderly man, probably in his 80s, raised his hand. "How did you know," he asked, "when it was time to stop trying? How did you know the relationship couldn't be saved?" I thought about his question carefully. "I don't think I knew," I finally said. "I think I just reached a point where I couldn't keep sacrificing myself and call it love anymore. I think I realized that real love, healthy love, doesn't require one person to disappear for the other to thrive. And once I understood that, the question wasn't whether the relationship could be saved. It was whether I could save myself." After the seminar, a woman approached me. She was probably in her mid-60s, well-dressed, composed. "Thank you for your courage," she said. "My daughter, she's been, I think she might be. I don't know how to—" She stopped, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I've been making excuses for so long, telling myself it's normal, that I'm being too sensitive. But hearing you, I realize I've been lying to myself." I gave her Sarah's contact information and the name of the support group I'd started attending. "It's hard," I told her. "The hardest thing I've ever done. But you deserve better. You deserve to be valued and respected, not used and manipulated. Remember that." She hugged me, hard, and whispered, "Thank you." Driving home that evening, I felt something unexpected. Pride. Not the defensive, brittle pride that covers shame, but real, solid pride in who I'd become and what I'd survived. I'd been through something terrible, something that had nearly destroyed me, and I'd come out the other side stronger. Summer arrived, warm and generous. On a July afternoon, David called. "Mom, I have something to tell you. Marcus reached out to me. He wants to talk to you, says he's been in therapy and is ready to make amends." My stomach tightened. "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should do whatever feels right for you. Not what I want, not what Marcus wants, not what society says you should do. What do you want?" I thought about it for days. Part of me wanted to hear what Marcus had to say, wanted to believe he'd genuinely changed. But a larger part of me recognized that wanting him to change and him actually changing were two very different things. I called David back. "Tell him I'm willing to meet with him, but only with a family therapist present. Someone neutral who can help us communicate honestly. And tell him I need to see proof of this therapy he's supposedly been in. I need more than words. I need concrete evidence that he's doing the work." Marcus agreed. We scheduled a session for late August. The therapist's office was in Park Slope, airy and comfortable. Marcus was already there when I arrived, looking nervous. He'd lost weight, I noticed. Looked older somehow. The therapist, Dr. Klein, facilitated the conversation carefully. "Marcus has asked for this session to begin the process of making amends. Margaret, you're under no obligation to accept those amends or to continue this relationship if it doesn't feel healthy for you. This is about both of you having the opportunity to speak your truth. Marcus, would you like to begin?" Marcus cleared his throat. "Mom, I've spent the last 6 months in therapy, working on understanding my patterns and behaviors. I've come to realize that I treated you terribly, not just with the piano, though that was the most visible harm, but for years. I used you. I manipulated you. I made you doubt your own reality so I could keep taking from you, and I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, deeply sorry." I waited. There had to be more. Apologies were just words until backed by understanding and change. "I think," Marcus continued, "I think I learned early on that I could get what I needed from you by making you feel guilty, by making you feel like you owed me, like being a good mother meant sacrificing everything for me. And you did sacrifice everything, and instead of being grateful, I just kept taking more. I told myself I deserved it, that you wanted to help, that it was fine. But it wasn't fine. It was abuse, financial and emotional abuse. I abused my own mother." He was crying now, not the manipulative tears I'd seen before, but genuine, ugly crying. "The piano, God, the piano. When I think about what I did, how I just took this precious thing and sold it like it meant nothing, how I tried to convince you that you'd agreed to it, I hate myself. I understand if you can never forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me." Dr. Klein looked at me. "Margaret, would you like to respond?" "I hear your apology," I said carefully, "and I believe you mean it right now, in this moment. But Marcus, you've apologized before. You've promised to change before. What's different this time?" "I'm in therapy twice a week," he said. "I'm on medication for anxiety and depression. I've joined a 12-step program for people with money issues. I've completely restructured my business to be more sustainable, so I'm not constantly in crisis mode. I've started paying back the money I owe you, $100 a month. I know it's not much, but it's what I can manage right now. I'm trying, Mom. Really trying." I looked at Dr. Klein. "Is it enough?" I asked. "Is saying sorry and going to therapy enough to undo years of harm?" "That's not for me to answer," she said gently. Only you can decide what's enough for you. But I can say that Marcus has been doing serious work. The changes he's describing are real. Whether they're enough, whether they're sustainable, whether they'll translate into a healthier relationship between you, that remains to be seen. Healing from this kind of harm takes time, years, often, and it requires ongoing effort from both parties. We talked for another hour. Marcus answered my questions, accepted responsibility, didn't make excuses or deflect. It felt different from every other conversation we'd ever had. More real. More honest. When the session ended, I told him I needed time to think, that I appreciated his apology and his efforts, but I wasn't ready to resume our relationship yet, that I'd need to see sustained change over months or years before I could trust him again. He nodded, accepting it without argument. I understand. Thank you for giving me this chance to apologize. Even if you decide you can't have me in your life anymore, thank you for hearing me out. I left the session feeling emotionally drained, but also strangely hopeful. Not hopeful that Marcus and I would magically repair everything. I wasn't naive enough to believe that, but hopeful that maybe, possibly, he was finally taking responsibility for his actions. Whether that would be enough remained to be seen. Fall arrived again, marking a full year since the vacation that had changed everything. I was playing piano at the community center when Eleanor mentioned that the center was looking for volunteers to help with their annual fundraiser. What kind of help? I asked. Planning, coordinating, the usual. But I thought of you because they want to do a musical showcase this year. Feature all the artists and musicians who use the center. You could perform or help organize or both. I signed up to help organize. Planning the showcase gave me purpose, structure, something to focus my energy on that wasn't my own drama. I recruited performers, scheduled rehearsals, coordinated with the venue. Marcus sent his second monthly payment right on time, $100, just like he'd promised. It was nothing compared to what he owed, but it was something. Proof that his words had some weight behind them. I didn't respond, didn't acknowledge it. I wasn't ready for that kind of communication yet, but I noticed it. Filed it away as data. The showcase was in November, right before Thanksgiving. 70 people performed, ranging from 8-year-old piano students to 85-year-old jazz singers. I played one piece, the Chopin, my contribution to the celebration of music and community. David and his family came to watch. So did Jennifer and Sarah. So did my students from the senior center, friends I'd made over the past year, people who'd become part of my new life. Marcus sent a text asking if he could attend. I said no, not yet, but thank you for asking. He replied, I understand. I'm proud of you, Mom. Those 4 words surprised me. He'd never said he was proud of me before. Not when I'd supported his dreams, not when I'd helped him through failures, not when I'd sacrificed everything to make his life easier. But now, when I was finally living for myself, he was proud. Maybe he really was changing. Or maybe he'd just learned to say the things I needed to hear. Time would tell. The showcase was a success. We raised enough money to keep the community center's music program running for another year. Afterward, there was a reception, and people kept coming up to thank me, to tell me how much the center meant to them, how much my work had mattered. Eleanor pulled me aside. You've built something here, she said. A community. A life. You should be proud of yourself. I am, I said, and meant it. That night, alone in my house with my new piano and my hard-won piece, I reflected on the year that had passed. 12 months ago, I'd been drowning, suffocated by relationships that demanded everything and gave nothing, convinced I had to accept mistreatment as the price of love. Now I was breathing, playing music that fed my soul, spending time with people who valued me, setting boundaries without guilt, building a life that was mine, truly mine, for the first time in decades. The piano was still gone. That loss would always ache. But in losing it, I'd found something I'd misplaced years ago. My own voice. My own worth. My own life. Marcus might change. He might not. Our relationship might heal. It might not. But I would be okay either way, because I'd learned the most important lesson of all. I didn't need anyone's permission to value myself. I didn't need anyone's approval to set boundaries. I didn't need anyone's validation to know my own worth. I just needed to remember who I was beneath all the roles I'd played for others. Mother, caregiver, supporter, fixer, enabler. Underneath all that, I was Margaret. A person with needs and desires and limits. A person who deserved respect and care and genuine love. And that person, that Margaret I'd rediscovered, was enough. More than enough. She always had been. I share this story because I think there are others out there who need to hear it. People who are drowning in relationships that demand everything and give nothing. People who've forgotten they're allowed to say no, to set boundaries, to choose themselves. If that's you, I want you to know, it's okay to walk away. It's okay to prioritize your own well-being. It's okay to love someone and still refuse to be mistreated by them. Real love doesn't require you to disappear. Real love doesn't ask you to sacrifice your peace, your financial security, your mental health. You deserve better. You've always deserved better. Have you experienced something like this? Do you know someone who has? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Sometimes just naming what we've been through, sharing it with others who understand, can be the first step toward healing. And if this story resonated with you, if it helped you feel less alone, please consider liking and subscribing. These stories matter. Your story matters. Let's make sure others who need to hear this message can find it.